Hello everyone, my name is Yongshu Zhang. I am a first year PhD student at EC department in University of Florida. My PhD supervisor is Dr. Shreya Saxena. Today I'm going to talk about behavioral classification of sequential neural activity using recurrent neural networks. Our data is from an experiment which is to train the mouse to perform a self-initiate lever pull task. In order to receive a water reward, mice were required to pull the lever. At the same time, neural activity was recorded from the dorsal cortex of the mouse in the form of wide field custom image activity. And for further details, welcome to look at our paper that will be published by IEEE Engineering in Medicine and Biology Conference. And then we would like to understand how this neural activity leads to the self-initiated behavior of lever pulls, which brain regions are involved in, and what's the earliest time we can tell that the behavior is forthcoming. To answer these questions, we train the recurrent neural network to perform binary classification of behavior versus control trails with time-varying neural activity at the inputs. After an exhaustive search over multiple hyperparameters, we settled on a 64 nodes RNN. For training our RNN, we use loss function of binary cross entropy, and we started by exploring common loss functions to use while training. One is a loss at time capital T, and the other one is using the loss at each time step. Here we calculate the sum of the loss across time, and we centered our trails at the lever pull using the loss function at time capital T. We achieve a high decoding accuracy of 0.82. However, this network can only decode the behavior 1.5 seconds after behavior initiation. If we consider the loss at each time step, the origin curve here, the final accuracy is lower, is only 0.64, but the decoding accuracy can be above chance level 2 seconds before behavior initiation. Although we would like to have the model perform binary classification, we want to return the high classification accuracy achieved by our first network. Thus, we have two goals: have a model that classifies the behavior as accurately and as early as possible. To get an idea of what's happening under the hood, we realize that our activity, the HT, for the network trained to classify the last time step, we perform an unsupervised dimensionality reduction method, the PCA, to reduce the dimension from 64 to a lower dimension. Here we show the first PC components of PCA. It captured 52.3% variance. Here the red curve is for the behavioral trails and the blue is for the control trails. We don't see a difference between the behavior and control trails till right at the end of the trail. To understand the signals related to the two different classes, we performed a supervised dimensionality reduction method. It is a FDA at each time point. The RN trajectory started to diverge between the two classes at the early time. When it is close to the end, the two trajectories from the two classes start to diverge quickly. Here, the shadow regions is the standard error. Then we consider if the RN trajectories diverge early, the network should be able to classify the input early. And if the divergence are larger, the accuracy should be higher, since it will be easier to classify the activity. But from the accuracy curve, the earliest decoding time is not as early as the divergence. Thus, it's possible that the difference between the two classes is encoded in the RN activity, but it's not being transferred to the upper layer that performs the actual classification. So this leads us to the conclusion that only a set of constant output bits may not be able to perform both goals, early and accurate classification. This we consider modifying our network to include a dynamic output layer with time-varying output bits. And we use two-step training method. We first train the network as described previously, and then we fix the RN layer and retrain the output layer dynamically. In this way, we can get specific output bits for each time step. It's a WYT. And here, this figure shows the comparison of different strategies. We can see the green curve is the temporal accuracy of dynamic output bits as compared with the accuracy using constant bits, the black curve the dynamic output will show significantly higher decoding accuracy from 2 seconds before the behavior to 1.5 seconds after the behavior, and it greatly improved the earliest decoding time. It is 1.5 seconds before the behavior. Just to verify whether the output waves being dynamic are enough, we also train the whole network, including the RNN layer dynamically. So all the waves are time varying waves. The figure is showing the temporal accuracy of the 3 strategies, and we can see that we don't get a higher final accuracy or an earlier decoding time using all the time varying ways. So having dynamic output ways seem to be enough for this network to perform early classification. We now come back to the question: which brain regions are important towards behavior classification? To get this question, we performed occlusion across both time and regions. We occluded the input and then feed the occluded input into the trained network. We can then compare the accuracy of the network. If the accuracy goes down, that means the occluded inputs are important towards classification. We apply the occlusion for the constant waste network, and this curve shows the temporal occlusion only. As expected, the later neural activity is more important towards decoding in this network. This figure is showing the important metrics of time versus region. We combine the subregions with the same function and occluded them together. Finally, we found the somatosensory, visual, and cognitive region are important for decoding. And then we found the somatosensory region is the most important one. And then we are still working on extending these methods to the network with dynamic output waves. Okay, finally, thanks to my collaborators and thanks to the Saxon lab where I come from, and thanks for the support from UF AI Catalyst funding. Thank you.